Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for a very special edition of Leading Voices, a new series featuring some of the best minds of University of the Pacific and beyond. Today, it is a great honor to welcome back to Pacific, John Chambers. Mr. Chambers is quite simply one of the most influential business leaders, thinkers, and innovators of our time. For more than 2 decades, Mr. Chambers served as executive chairman and CEO of Cisco. Remarkably, he grew the technology company from $70 million when he joined in 1991 to $47 billion by the time he stepped down as CEO in 2015. After serving as Cisco's chair until 2017, Mr. Chambers launched JC2 Ventures, where he helps 18 startups grow. Mr. Chambers also is focused on promoting entrepreneurship, gender equity, and accelerating new business creations around the world. He is the author of the book, Connecting the Dots, Leadership for a Startup World. He was appointed global ambassador for French tech by the president of France, and the Prime Minister of India calls him the global ambassador for that country. Mr. Chambers' extraordinary leadership has been recognized with numerous awards. He was named one of the best performing CEOs in the world in 2015 by the Harvard Business Review. He received the Edison Achievement Award for Innovation, and last year he was awarded the highest civilian honor bestowed by the government of India for his contributions to trade and the tech industry. Mr. Chambers is also a great philanthropist. Here at Pacific, his support of our university is recognized by the John T. Chambers Technology Center and the Chambers Family Endowed Scholarship. John, welcome back to University of the Pacific.
President Callahan, it's my honor to be with you today, and I'd like to, if it's all right, Chris, for all of us to use first names, and of course the students as well. So it's exciting to be back, and I look forward to our give and take.
Good. Thanks so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule, John. We so appreciate it. Let's start off with your career. You've had so many great successes. Which one is, in your mind, the biggest success and the one that you're most proud of?
I believe you win as a team or lose as a team, and I focus on it's always a team when you're successful. I think what I'm most proud of is the way that we at Cisco changed the world, changed the way the world works, lives, learns, and plays. And when I said that in the very early 90s, they said, you're a router company, you're a techie, only techies use this. I said, no, it's going to change every aspect of our lives, mainly in a positive way, and it has. But one of the things, Chris, if it's all right, I also want to point out that a leader, whether you're a student going into jobs after you graduate from University of Pacific or the head of a company, you're as much a product of how you handle your setbacks as you are your successes. And I've had a number of those. I've been through 6 economic downturns, and we came out of them each one stronger. This is my 5th pandemic, obviously by far and away the worst, my 4th supply chain issue. And my hardest time, my most disappointment time was in 2001. I kept doing the right thing. My numbers indicated business was fine. So prior to what they called the dot-com bubble, we were the most valuable company in the world, and we could do nothing wrong. And I didn't see it coming. My numbers were growing great at 70% year over year in December. I thought we're going to have a great next quarter. We were minus 30% the next month. Mathematically impossible. And that was a very painful one, and one that I had to make changes to the organization structure. We are a family at Cisco, and I was there. I knew every illness of every employee, the spouse, their children. We created 10,000 millionaires of our employees. And that was really exciting and fulfilling. So it was actually, however, how I handled the downturn that may have been the best job I did. Jack Welch, who is a legend in front of me, one generation ahead and leaders of General Electric, and the best leader probably for 2 decades in the world of business, he said, John, you will never have a great company. Do you have a near-death experience? He called me up at the end of 2001. He said, John, you now have a great company. I mean, it was the worst year of my life business-wise. It was so painful, everything with it. And I said, Jack, you're going to be the only person that ever says that. And by the way, he was. And so it's lessons. Everybody loves to talk about our accomplishments, but it's how we handle the challenges we were given in life. that really determine who you are.
John, can you sort of on that same theme, you're a great innovator and entrepreneur, and with that comes some failures, right? How do you get your team members to understand that failing is part of that process? Now, learning from the failure, as you know, is a more important part of the process, but that notion of the acceptance of some level of failure in experiments.
Well, if you think about it, Chris, the role of a leader is, let's say of a CEO as an example, is to set the vision and strategy for my organization, is to develop, recruit, retain, and periodically change the leaders to implement that vision and strategy. It's culture and communications. And so to answer the question very crisply, you have to walk the talk, and you've got to be realistic about the mistakes you make and tell people the challenges that go with it. I start with, I'm dyslexic. That is hard for anybody in the classes that is, you read backwards. And it's a challenge that you have to learn to deal with, and then you can actually play it to your strengths over time. But sharing with people that I was dyslexic, I actually thought that would be a weakness when I first did it by mistake during a Take Our Children to Work day, when a young girl couldn't get her question out, and she returned to her chair crying, and I followed her off stage, and she said, I'm dyslexic, I couldn't do this. And I said, I am too. And all of a sudden I remember my mic was on. I thought my team would think less of me because this would be a weakness. And I was very wrong. All of us have weaknesses, and being transparent about that connects you so much better. I've made a lot of mistakes. And by the way, I intend to make more. I did 180 acquisitions, which is unheard of in our industry. We wrote the playbook on it. Most people would say we do it better than anybody else in the whole tech industry in terms of capability. But I said going in, I'm going to miss on a third of them. And everybody says, yeah, I get it. But when I miss, I got criticized really hard. And I made one mistake on a beautiful flip camera that competed with where Apple was going. And Steve Jobs announced, he said, this is a great product Cisco has, but we're going to make a better one and give it to you for free. And I closed a $600 million acquisition and folded it in 2 months. So when you take risks, by definition, you're going to make mistakes. I think Silicon Valley understands that better than any other place in the world. And it makes you a better leader when you have made mistakes. Just don't make the same ones twice, and you learn from them.
And learn from them. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Thank you, John. John, everybody who knows you talks about your spirit, your high energy level, your enthusiasm, your positive attitude. Where does that come from? Where do you draw inspiration from?
Well, my parents I was very fortunate. I had two parents who were doctors, and they both had a huge influence on my life. Mom taught me the emotional IQ side of the house, and Dad taught me the business knowledge, thinking not 1 quarter out or 1 year, but 5, 10, 15 years out. And I learned so much from both of them. I am an optimist by nature. I consider myself a realistic optimist. And with this downturn back in March, I said, this is going to be worse than people think. It's going to last 3 to 5 quarters. And for the first time, people like on CNBC or Fox News, that some of those clips were from, said, John, you're a pessimist now. That's not your normal course. My parents are doctors. They taught me to deal with the world the way it is and to share it. On the energy, I love what I do, Chris. And for those of you students in the group, get a great education at UOP and then go to jobs that you like. And if you don't like your job, go get a different one. Life's too short not to enjoy what we're doing every moment. And I thrive on what I do. My pupils dilate when I talk to my startups. And it took me a while to be tough on myself and receive criticism back. And we just did it off the last session. After reviewing our plans for the next year with my team, I asked each team member to tell me one area they thought I should do better. And they were direct. Hurts a little bit. But it's also creating that culture and that openness and being secure enough to be able to receive that criticism in a constructive way, and makes me better because of it.
Did that take a while to develop during your career?
Yeah. I thought that as a CEO, especially in my early years, and candidly, the market was way too generous. We won, as you said, every award there was to win, not just on business accomplishments, but corporate social responsibility, giving back. And at first, I thought that it was so important to almost seem invincible. And so when we got knocked down, which we did a number of times as a company, sometimes perhaps mistakes I made, but lots of times the major economy hits, the ability to get back up as a leader and this is when leadership is lonely. It's hard to explain to anybody the pain that you go through, the hollowness in your heart, when you know that if you misstep, you could take the company down with you. A lot of people could lose their jobs, your stock could drop dramatically, et cetera, and you'd hurt your customers, but having the courage to navigate through it. So I've learned I'm better the more transparent I am. And candidly, that also, however, helps. It's like a good athlete of the Warriors. It's easy for Warriors, for Steph Curry to say, boy, I really made 2 dumb mistakes tonight and it cost us the game. And everybody admires that. But part of the reason they admire it is he wins a whole bunch of games. So it's easier to be a little bit tougher on yourself after you've notched a couple of successes with it. And it's something that I think is important to develop. In today's world, your currency as an individual, as a leader of a company or even a country, it's based upon your track record. It's based upon the relationships you build, and it's based upon trust. And those are the 3 most important things, I think, in terms of your career advice. I would add to that family. You heard me talk about family. I'm really proud of my family. Very, very proud of the family I built at Cisco. And we had the lowest turnover in the industry, an industry that averages 15% turnover per year. We were at 5%. And we shared the successes and the good and bad times together.
John, you've mentored countless people in your career. Mm-hmm. Who are your mentors? Who have affected you over the course of your wonderful career?
Well, some of them may surprise you. Thomas Friedman, who writes for the New York Times, he's been a pretty direct mentor in many ways on it. Sometimes it was key customers, like my first customer, Estefane at Borg Warner. Sometimes it was names your students might recognize. I learned a tremendous amount from Shimon Peres, the president of Israel. Over 17 years of knowing him, he was constantly teaching me as we go through it. Lou Platt at HP, I came out to Silicon Valley from the East Coast where I was with IBM and Wang, and I came out here and I didn't know Silicon Valley, and Hewlett Packard at that time was the culture of the Valley, and it was the original garage startup. And I called up Lou Platt and I said, Lou, I'm from the East Coast. I don't know much about the Valley. I've only got a company of 400 people, and it's called Cisco, and it builds internet products. And it's not Cisco, the food trucks, it's the internet company. He laughed and he said, do you want to come over and meet? And I said, yes, sir, I do. And he mentored me. And then I asked her to come back a quarter later. We did that for 4 years. He made a huge impact on me in terms of business success. And by that time, we were on a roll. So I said in my last meeting with him, I said, Lou, it's time for me to pay you back. How can I help HP and how can I help you? And this answer is what I try to live my life with. And I'm far from perfect. I made a lot of mistakes, as we alluded to earlier. But he said, John, I want you to give back to the next generation. So I've tried to do that. And you learn from everyone. It doesn't matter whether it's the receptionist at a hotel you're checking into, or a reporter, or a famous leader. And I've learned over the years, especially when I see somebody that I respect and can learn from, easiest thing to do is share with me what's your best piece of advice. And it's amazing how they give you advice or mentorship that really helps you in life.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And we have a mentorship opportunity today with all of our fantastic Pacific students here. As they're starting to think about their careers going forward, what advice would you have directly for them?
Well, I came out of West Virginia, and very proud of that, by the way, and still heavily involved back at West Virginia. And you and I share the common admiration for the president of West Virginia University, Gordon Gee, in terms of the background. But my parents taught me from the beginning, the one equalizer in life was education. And then you had to be in the right place for that education to get you the job you needed. The second equalizer in life is now the internet and technology. So I think it is for the students realize the education, no one can ever take that degree away from you. And people understand the value it brings in terms of your ability to make a difference and the confidence, the maturity that we get during college. At times I wasn't the most mature person in the world at college, and we won't go down that discussion any further than that. It is that education that gives you your foundation for the rest of your life and your confidence. And then it is the network, which we're now learning with Zoom and all the other technologies that allow the video capability. Capability, you can work from almost anywhere you want. So if you get an education, you learn how to use technology, and every job will have large technology parts in it in the future, regardless of your industry. Those are the two equalizers in life.
John, you mentioned earlier a lot of challenges that you faced, external challenges. Can you talk, and now we're facing sort of probably the biggest external challenge of all of our lifetimes in COVID-19. In your leadership career, did you develop over time any kind of, for lack of a better description, crisis management playbook that people can apply to other situations that might be useful for us today?
The answer is yes. I develop a playbook for almost everything I do. Early on in my career, I would have considered that bureaucracy, even though some of my business teachers in Indiana and West Virginia and Duke would disagree with that from the beginning. But if you have a playbook that you've thought through well, you can move with speed that others cannot. An example your students will get and your alumni is I could get a brand new idea for an acquisition from a source that I respected on Thursday night for a $3 billion acquisition of a company I didn't know at all. And because it was in play, I could meet with the CEO the next day, have a handshake on the agreement, and buy a $3 billion company and announce on Monday morning. Nobody does that in the industry. But we did it because we had a playbook and a team that all knew, much like a good sports team, the roles that they play. The playbook for crisis management is equally as simple, although hard to implement. Rule number one on the playbook is understand how much was the external environment, such as COVID, the economic downturn, the supply chain issues, but also how much is internal. Because if you were doing things that needed to change, those internal things can trip you up just as much as the bigger picture. Then develop the 3, 5, 7 major programs you're going to run to navigate through the crisis management. That's usually about survival, cash, head count. Then it's about customers and your employees. And this is where you will build your relationship or not with your customers and your employee family, is how you handle the crisis. It's then to also begin to say, here's what we're going to look like when we come out, and then reporting back to your team on a regular basis. If you have to make dramatic changes, do it once, do it at the very front end, and do it crisply. And even though that's very painful and it sounds tough, and I'm not a tough person, I wish I was a little bit tougher because it's challenging and hurts at times, but you've got to move quickly because you don't protect anybody when you don't. And so companies that had to make changes for this downturn should have made their changes 6 months ago. And yet you see a large number of them just doing it today. And many companies won't survive who didn't make these changes on it. So it's a very manageable playbook. I think it can apply to big businesses or even countries in terms of directions, and one that works well for me.
Good. Even universities, can we apply it to?
Even a university, because the fun thing is, Chris, is I think universities have to change as much over this next decade as the businesses or governments do. And you just see it today. How do you do the combination of virtual and physical worlds? How do your professors move from a controlled environment where they had your attention to a unstructured environment on it? How do you focus more on outcomes? And what Gordon Gee is doing at West Virginia is knocking the silos down between business and engineering and law and medicine and liberal arts to what's the outcome of the student we want and how do we train them to be able to do that, and then use these technologies in ways that we hadn't anticipated. And there are always benefits that go with every crisis. Perhaps the biggest benefit of this crisis is we were forced to the whole world but especially here in the US, how to use the technology and make it a part of our everyday lives. I do between 7 and 15 video sessions per day. I will often start off in Europe and end up in Asia. I did a session the other day with the French government and the French business community and the Indian government, the Indian business community, because I'm close to both of them. And so we lit up the world in terms of those type of activities. So it is I think, a new opportunity for us all to really embrace technology. And I challenge the technology companies. Technology used to be viewed by Americans and by each person in our country, 90+% of them viewed technology was the right thing for the country and right thing for them. Now that number's below 50. And part of that was self-inflicted by technology companies who lost track of the definition of capitalism about doing well for your shareholders, but it also is about doing well for society and saying, how do you do both together? And Cisco, as I alluded to earlier, won just about every corporate social responsibility award around the world, from the Middle East to China, to the Democratic president and Secretary of State, to the Republican president, Secretary of State in the US, the top corporate achievement awards. We were also the most profitable company and biggest market share in every country where we won those awards. So I think doing the right thing for society and doing the right thing for your investors actually goes hand in hand. I don't think they're two different platforms.
Thank you. Is there a book or two that has particularly influenced your thinking on innovation and entrepreneurship and leadership, as you know, across your career? Anything that you sort of draw on or help define your leadership path?
You know, because I'm dyslexic, and those people who are, you hate reading because you almost read backwards. And while I have a briefing of literally everything imaginable for every meeting today, including this one, they're quick cliff notes that I can read quickly. So the books, I'm not a huge consumer of that. On business, probably Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. I found it to be a simple read, very helpful. Books, Shimon Peres and saying, how important dreaming is to nations or to people. But I learned my examples more from people. And so learning from very famous people like a Prime Minister Modi or Macron today, to you see up behind me sports activities. Coach Krzyzewski at Duke, I was a classmate of him in Indiana, and we got to be reasonable friends and go to the Duke games regularly. And he taught me a lot about leadership of an organization structure, not a basketball coach. He's an amazing leader on it. You see the Dallas Cowboys, even though I'm a 49er fan, what Jerry Jones did down there was amazing in the direction of it. So I often learn from sports and leaders of that type and from athletes themselves about the importance of leadership. The Warriors, every time they pass over 130 times a game, they win 95% of the games. I mean, no organization's ever thought that way. And you have a UOP alumni who's been very active at there, Ted Leland, who's a very good friend. And when he was at Stanford, I went to him and I asked, how did you all build this program to be the top school in the nation in more number one positions than any other school when you only have 7,000 undergraduates? And he did what any good athletic director does first. He said, well, John Hennessy, the president of the school, did a great job. And then I said, all right, how did you do it? And he broke it down to his playbook. How did he walk through it? How did he make it happen? And I said, what are your key goals going forward? Which is a good question to ask people, period. And then he said, I'll know when it's time that I've accomplished my goals when I finally get a football stadium redone. So when they did that football stadium, I knew, even though he didn't announce it, that meant he was leaving on it. And he loved University of Pacific and has been very active coming back to your old school. So I learned from Ted as an example as well.
Great. That's wonderful. Now, John, I can be very selfish and just talk to you all day, which I would love to do, but okay, we want to give our students the opportunity to ask you some questions directly. So I think Christopher is going to help navigate us through questions from students as well as other audience members?
Yeah, so just a quick reminder that please raise your hand. We will call on you. When you have the raised hand, we will ask you to unmute yourself so that way you can verbally ask questions to John Chambers and get a chance to ask any questions that you want. So we'll give a moment for everyone to find that raised hand. It's underneath the participants tab and then the raised hand. So go ahead and click on that. All right, and we already have some questions coming up. So the first one that I saw, Mark C, class of 20.
How's it going? Hey, John.
Hey, Mark, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Good. You got that good-looking beard. That's a techie image. I try to grow it. My wife just goes, no way. I'm jealous.
Oh, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I had a question, though. We talked a lot about entrepreneurship today.
Yes.
What would you say to anyone trying to pursue that route but doesn't necessarily have all the capital means to do so?
Yeah, if the first thing I would say is what is very important, in my opinion, in America is that everybody has a chance to achieve their aspirations. And I mean everyone, regardless of where you're geographically located, your religion, the color of your skin, your gender, etc. And this is why I'm such a huge believer in education, because unless you get a reasonably good education, no matter how strong your drive is, or even your access to resources, it's hard to achieve those dreams. Having said that, the one thing I've learned in Silicon Valley is anybody that really has the drive and the energy and the education has a very good chance at making a difference. So I would say first, dream big. Secondly, learn how to handle setbacks, because when you come up with a great concept, the average startup that I help nurture or the Valley helps nurture gets told no probably 10 times about venture capital investing in them before they get one to say yes on it. And it's your ability to have that dream and then say, how do you do it in a unique way? And then surround yourself with good people to make it happen. But my goal is to increase by threefold the number of startups in America and to get it across every single state and to do it across every diverse group in our country. So it is a country where each of us has a chance to make a difference. Now, to answer your question very directly, and an example, 10,000 millionaires at Cisco. I mean, we did that for our whole team and shared the success on it in terms of the direction. So get a good education. Don't fear failure. Failure is part of learning on it. Come with a plan that really makes sense. Surround yourself with great people and have the courage to go for it. And if you miss, go for it again.
Thank you, John. It sounds like I'm well on my way.
I hear you on both comments.
Yes, sir.
Next question. Thanks, guys.
All right, excellent. Next question, Kelvin, class of 20.
Hi, John.
Hey, Calvin.
So you're a big icon in the tech industry, and so I just kind of wanted to get your insight on the current development of artificial intelligence and how you think it'll affect the technology sector within the future.
Well, I learned over many years, and in over 45 years in the industry, you've seen almost every movie there is to see, and movies tend to repeat just with different outcomes. I'm a believer that when you think about the future of technology, you want to understand the business or the educational or the government model that you're changing and how the technology does it. Since the internet, there have been so many new technologies that people got really excited about: Bitcoin, blockchain, a whole bunch of them. Some developed, some did not on it. But artificial intelligence, in my opinion, will be the most fundamental change since the internet in terms of its effect in every level of society. And I think it will cure cancer if done right. I think it will change the way that you as a business interface to your customers. I think it will allow you to have driverless cars and things of that type. So if I were a student and like technology, and remember, every one of you all, regardless if you're in business, engineering, liberal arts, your future will be halfway dependent upon how well you deal with technology. I'd learn about artificial intelligence. You don't have to program in it, but understand the concepts, the strengths, limitations. I'd learn about cybersecurity, and I'd learn about entrepreneurship. And those three, I think, will prepare you for life. And that would be what I would advise my adult kids, that if they were going to school again, that would be what I would suggest they consider majoring in. So I think artificial intelligence is here. I have probably 12 of my 18 companies have artificial intelligence pieces in it. Those that are on fire the most in a positive way are growing at 300% a year. And it has to do with artificial intelligence used for call centers and how companies interface to their customers. So to say I'm bullish on it would be an understatement.
All right. Thank you for your answer.
My pleasure.
All right, next up we have Marina, class of 21.
Hey, Marina.
I believe that's me. It's Mariana. Hi,
Oh,
John. It's
Mariana.
a pleasure.
Hey,
Yeah,
Marianne.
it's a pleasure to be here learning from you today. I was wondering, what specific personality traits do you believe it's necessary in leadership positions today?
Yeah, it's interesting. The one thing I've learned in the Valley, I used to think back when I was with IBM and Wang, I was pretty diverse in my thinking. I think leadership traits are those that really build very diverse teams. And I'm talking about gender, race, sexual preference, everything. And so I think leadership is about how well do you build a great team, hold yourself accountable for the results, how well do you walk the culture, how diverse are your teams and your implementation, how well do you create an environment where you can challenge each other, but once, like a good sports team, once you decide to play, you're going to run, you run it with the whole play. You win or lose as a team. You've got to have courage, but you've got to be realistic on where you are in terms of the direction. And then I think you've got to lead by example. And this is what I tried to do the best of my ability, both at Cisco and now with my startups. And I love teaching the startups. I like raising your adult kids. You get to see them learn about culture and diversity, et cetera. You know, that a case in point, I'm a huge mentor of many women as they come up through their business career on it. And we had 3 female directors at Cisco 20 some years ago, just because it was the right thing to do for diversities of the team and direction. And then you think about your role as a leader. Did you get the business results? How good was your team? Did you stay close to your customers, your constituencies, if you're in healthcare, close to your patients, et cetera? And did you have the courage to dream and make things happen? So that would be a minute-and-a-half discussion on what we could probably write a book on, or we could discuss in class with you and your peers for a couple hours on leadership characteristics. But perhaps key takeaway, leader has to think of themselves like the head of a dog sled. You've got to set the pace for the whole team, but you've got to set the pace the whole team can keep up with. It will never go faster than you, but if you go too fast, the team will break down. And leaders have to remember we're all equal in life. I really, really believe that. And it's amazing what you can do when you don't care who gets the credit on it. And then I think leaders have to dream. I'm a big believer in dreaming what some people consider impossible. You could imagine looking at a country like France that just 5 or 6 years ago was a wonderful place to visit and have great dinners and stuff like that. But last place you'd want to put businesses or startup. In 5 years, they've become the best place in Europe to do business, and their startups are up 5x in 5 years. But it was the willingness of a country and a leader in Macron to dream what was possible, and then to set goals that everybody thought was impossible and achieve them.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, next up we have Marissa C., class of 22.
Hey, Marissa.
Hi. I was wondering, what is one thing that you wish you would have learned earlier in life?
I think it's how to dream bigger. Yeah, and I got criticized at times, and part of it's fair, for dreaming too big. I will dream even bigger in this next stage of my life. Second is it's important to enjoy every moment you're here. And so even on the tough days when you get knocked down, focus on the positives as you go forward. I think how to receive criticism in a constructive way and how to give it in a constructive way on it. And then one more, as a leader, if somebody doesn't fit your culture of the team, don't recruit them or push them off the island, tell them to leave. Because every time that I'd get somebody who, let's use a basketball example, that was a 6'7" male or female player that was really good shot and could rebound well, but wouldn't fit into the team, I made the mistake of saying, well, they're so good, I'll find a way to get them to fit in the team. I regretted it. So learning that if somebody doesn't match your culture, it will cost you in the long run if you bring them in. And then on basic things that might surprise you, and this I was taught by a lawyer back at Wang Laboratories many years ago, I asked him for a best piece of advice. And that is something I do recommend each of you do. Ask people for advice. First, they'll think you're smart by asking, and they feel good because you ask them for it. But he said, John, as we're walking down the hall, and he had just spent $10 million with me, one of the biggest orders I'd gotten at that time from a law firm. And he was the one that was his money because he was retiring. I said, what's your best piece of advice you can give me? And he looked at me and he said, never pass up a restroom. And at first I was disappointed with the answer. And then I realized he was way ahead of me on it. And we walked down another probably 40 steps. He said, do you understand what I just told you? And I said, I got it. When you finish a meeting, complete the meeting, summarize it, get everything off your mind, get ready for the next meeting. And before going in, plan what you want to do, get all the stress, calling home, getting a transaction done, getting prepared for the next meeting, and then start immediately with your organization and structure. And as simple as that is, that's something that I did not do well before. I'd often have follow-up actions on the meeting, didn't summarize it. I'd be thinking about what to do. I wouldn't get the stress off my mind prior to going to the next meeting. I'd be into the meeting and I'd fumble a little bit. What do I want to do next on it? So I think the example is in teaching people, you've got to make the concepts easy so you can remember. So never pass up a restroom. But what I'm really saying is complete what you're doing, whether it's a homework assignment or a business meeting. Get all the stress off your mind before you go into your next meeting or take the next test, etc. And when you go in, be ready to start immediately on it. Some of the best advice I got that was really useful. I didn't do that as well earlier. I do it much better now.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Next up, we have Andre, class of 20.
Hey,
Hello,
Andre.
Mr. Chambers. How are you?
You got to call me John. You can call me Mr. when I'm old.
All right, John. How are you doing?
Nice beard. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, first, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience, and knowledge with us. It's very nice. And as an engineering student, I think I've heard your name almost every day as I was going to class, to CTC, obviously. So it's really great to be able to chat with you today. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Now, my question.
Now, a lesson for everyone. Whenever anybody is that nice at the beginning of their question they're about to ask you, fasten your seatbelt because usually they really zing you. So one of the lessons learned in interviews, you're always ready for a tough question, but especially if somebody is really nice, then you get ready just in case this one comes out of left field. So bring it on. I'm ready.
I like to think that I'm nice. So, in general, but I'll still ask my question. And it's about, 5G and the justification of its implementation. Everyone would kind of agree that 5G has a number of key benefits, such as higher data rate, for instance.
Yes.
But it seems to me that 5G also has a very costly, impact on the environment. And in particular, 5G will make more than 6 billion phone obsolete, in the next couple of years. Everyone will have to change their phone from 4G to 5G. Kind of has that e-waste perspective with 5G. And that's why I wanted to ask you, do you think the marginal performance gain from 5G justify the whole, heavy environmental burden related to that technology? And marginally, what role do you think big tech companies will play in raising awareness for more sustainable development model in the future?
Okay, so let me take the second one and then key it into your first question. I'm a huge believer in Prime Minister Modi. The first time I sat down with him to outline his view of a digital India and the impact it could have, and we went back and forth in digital manufacturing. I said, yeah, that will work. And then smart cities, then startups and healthcare and education. He said, John, I want you to help us think about how to use technology to dramatically change the impact we have on the environment. Because if we develop our country with the growth, but the damage to the environment that China, the US, and Europe did in their industrial age, that's not good. So how do you use the technology differently? And so I think technology can have a huge impact on everything from how we use water, key resources. I think it can have a huge impact with a company like Bloom Energy that does technology at the edge of the grid with zero CO2 emissions on it. One of my hot startups that I bet on purely as a way out there approach is growing crickets for protein. And you can solve, in my opinion, world hunger with the cleanest form of protein there is, with 1/10 the environmental damage that meat does or agricultural farming does on it. So I think technology can play a huge role in making it a cleaner and a better environment we live in many categories. And this is that discussion of capitalism for both good for business, but also good for society on it. Now to the impact of 5G. First, equipment today of any type is obsolete, unfortunately, in 3 years, and usually needs to be changed out at 5 to 7. The market just moves that fast. The amount of electrical consumption you have in a device can drop dramatically in 3 to 5 years, whether that's a server or a TV device, etc. on it. And it's, are we designing these products so we can recycle and so we can do nominal damage to the environment when we bring them back in? Will 5G be as big as people think it is? Oh yeah. When you think about when Cisco was started, there were only 1,000 devices connected to the internet. Today is 18 billion. Within a decade, it's going to be 500 billion. Everything's going to be interconnected. 5G allows you to do that in volume and bring the internet of everything with artificial intelligence and the cloud moving to edge to life. So yeah, I think it's a very important technology. If you look at the future of a country, it doesn't matter if you're in Asia, the US or Europe, almost every major country has a major program around artificial intelligence, 5G, quantum computing, and the Internet of Things and cybersecurity. So yes, I think it's going to be big, and yes, I do think it's very important, but I think we've got to develop things with understanding the impact it has on society.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, and so the last hand up that we see on there, so if anyone else has any questions, make sure you raise your hand, but we will move on to Christian M., class of 21.
Hey, Christian.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Thanks for being here. So you've talked a little bit about culture today, and as a water polo player for UOP, we've been really working on developing our team culture and our team mentality. And I was wondering, of the companies and teams that you've been a part of, which ones had the strongest culture and what were the characteristics of that company's culture and mentality?
Gotcha. So first of all, water polo, maybe with the exception of wrestling, is the hardest sport there is. My one of my two best friends at Indiana University Graduate School was a water polo player there when they had their national championships team. So I admire your admiration and how difficult it can be. The culture, you will never have a strong team or a strong company without a culture. And don't kid yourself. The culture starts with the leader, the coach, but also the team captain. And if you do it right, the culture should be so embedded in the success of your team that allows you to achieve. A Netflix, as an example, is a culture like a professional sports team. It is, we want the very best. We want you to be all-stars, and you either get up or you get out on it. Cisco, we were a family. I even today, Shannon's here, I think I had 4 situations yesterday that tied back to prior Cisco people that were hitting some bumps in their life. And I got asked to give them a call. That's who we are as a culture on it. But by the way, we beat everybody. I mean, I didn't lose at Cisco. It doesn't mean we didn't get knocked down, but there was never a competitor that unseated us. We had 40, 70% market share against the biggest players and the hottest startups in the world, and culture accounted for a huge amount of that. The example of the culture of some of the things behind me, the culture of a Duke basketball team and what Mike Krzyzewski does, who I think is the best coach in all of basketball, either college or professional, was amazing. I used the example of the Warriors. The Warriors culture, and it's both the coach, it's the owners, but it's also Seth, basically of 130 passes per game, and we don't care who scores the points. We're going to get the person that can deliver the points for us. Cultures are so important, yet most people underestimate how important it is, or they say everybody understands it. Not true. You need to write it down. Say, do you really walk the culture of that? So for a water polo team, you've got to say, what is the culture of the team? What are you known for? How do you execute it? How do you move the balls around, etc.?
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And John, Christopher, I'm going to jump back in if I could.
Sure.
Just a few wrap-ups. This is absolutely flown by. But John, I did want to point out that your friend Ted Leland has been lurking around on the Zoom. Just so you know, I am calling him out. He is.
Ted, thank you.
Here.
I admire you greatly, and I meant everything I said earlier. I learned a huge amount from you, and you did an amazing thing creating with John Hennessy, I think, the top college programs in all sports that's ever been done.
And I've only been here a few months, John. I'm already learning from Ted, so it's a great it's a great advantage to have him here, as you well know. John, you talked about, in all of your connectivity to all of these great leaders around the country, you talked about sort of that single piece of advice, and you've given us so much wonderful advice today. But I'm wondering, for our students in particular, could you boil it down? I'll ask the John Chambers question. What's the single most important piece of advice that you can give us and these young students today?
Well, as I alluded to earlier, I think education is the equalizer in life. But I worry when we go through the tremendous challenges, the personal hardship, the sadness we are with the COVID pandemic, with the huge economic downturn. It's almost the economy is equally as bad to what the pandemic is doing, and how it's affecting everyone's lives, and what we've had here in California with the terrible fire season that is going on. I think people are wearing down, and that's only natural. But you only get out of this if we have the courage to dream, if we have the courage to dream dreams that may be almost unobtainable, and then execute on those unattainable dreams. And I would argue that's one of the reasons I have the sports stuff behind me, and Ted will know where I'm going with this, is it doesn't matter if you're talking about Bill Walton and UCLA, or you're talking about Jerry Rice and Joe Montana and Steve Young with the 49ers, or Coach K at Duke, or Jerry Jones, the Dallas Cowboys approach. You see how important the ability to dream and hold people to the responsibilities for that. And I think we've got to dream bigger as a nation. We've got to make it inclusive. We've got to be willing to fail. But you never come out of these downturns or the challenges unless you get a number of dreamers helping to lead us out of it. So I'm going to challenge you all. Have the courage to dream. Have the courage to fail. And know that very often your dreams can come true if you put the time and the attention and the education into making those dreams happen. And when you're successful, please give back. Give back to society. Give back to your employee teams and your friends.
Wonderful, wonderful advice, John. Let us wrap up on this. As you know, we're wrapping up in our final stretch of our Leading with Purpose campaign. So we like to ask all of our friends, in a single sentence, this is surprisingly hard to do, in a single sentence, what is your purpose?
Well, I'm going to use a number of commas in the sentence. And what I'm doing is buying time to think about it. And just so everybody knows, I will often talk for a second while I'm thinking about my answer on it. My purpose at this stage of my life, my number one purpose is family, period. The first of my life. But my business purpose at this time is to really make a difference one more time. I had the very unique opportunity with my peers to change the world with the internet, and it was a rush. The second thing I want to do, I'm going to enjoy life every minute. So yes, I did go up to Alaska fishing with my friends this year, careful on the pandemic issue. I fly helicopters, landed one there in your all's baseball field. A little bit rough landing, but I came over the high tension wires reasonably well. And I take risk in business. Most people are saying, are you crazy? And tell me again, what are you doing with crickets, et cetera? And I get outside my comfort zone. So I'm going to continue to live life to its fullest. And then I'm going to give back. I think those that either got lucky, and I've been very lucky in life, or have been successful, owe a huge obligation to give back to society. So I'm doing that across the world, in France on the startups, at West Virginia in terms of becoming a startup state and the inclusion of all diverse and minority groups and scholarships that I'm heavily involved in there, to 1.3 billion people in India, making it the model for the future on it. So giving back is fun, and they actually go together. So that's my purpose with a lot of commas in between.
We love it. We absolutely love it. John, I want to come back to you in just one moment, but first, let me thank Kelly Page and Christopher Ortega, Scott Biederman, for putting all this together today. I see Dr. Scott Mary, who helped organize this also. Thank you, Scott. We were joined today by Deans Howell and Carol, so thanks to them for joining us, and especially our students who never cease to inspire me. I loved all of your questions and your engagement, and so delighted that you were all able to be here. Finally, if we could unmute, if everybody can unmute, because I want to thank John, and we're all going to thank him actually with noise for this fantastic session. John, this has been invaluable for our students and our university. We're so fortunate that you were gracious enough to spend this amount of time with us. We cannot thank you enough. So everybody, if we can, please.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Dream big, you all.